Don't bring your son. My daughter's recital isn't for strays, my sister said after using $4,100 from the account I'd opened for mom's surgery to buy her kid a piano. My dad told me to stop acting like your child belongs everywhere. I said, understood. Left before intermission, and 4 days later. My mother was demanding to know why everything had stopped working. Quick thing before today's video, tap that subscribe button if you want more stories like this one. It's free, it's one click, and it's the biggest way you can support the channel. Huge thanks to everyone who's already on board. Now let's jump in. The buyer's hand was 6 inches from the keys when I opened the folder. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a checkbook already signed, and my sister was standing next to him in my parents' driveway with a smile I had seen her wear exactly 3 times in our lives, each time right before she got away with something. My father was on the porch with his arms crossed, pretending this was a family matter he had stepped outside to referee. The keys were to a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback that I had spent the last 3 years of my life restoring, and none of them knew I had driven up the street 2 minutes earlier, parked around the corner, and walked up the driveway with the folder under my arm. My name is Evan Caldwell. I'm 32. My job for the last 11 years has been estimating at a collision shop, which is a job that requires you to look at a wrecked vehicle and know, within about $100, what it's going to cost to make it right. And that kind of work teaches you what a car is worth, what labor is worth, and what the word stolen means in a paperwork sense, not an emotional one. If you've ever watched your family try to sell something they didn't own, stay with me. Subscribe if you want to hear how long it took the buyer to realize which one of us he should trust. Let me go back 3 years. The Mustang came out of a barn in southern Ohio in the fall of 2022. I'd been looking at it for a month on a private forum for restorers before I drove down on a Saturday to see it in person. It was bad. The roof was caved on the passenger side from a tree that had come down in a storm in 2004. The floor pans were rust. The interior was gone. The engine was seized. The guy who owned it, a farmer in his 70s, I wanted $3,000 and a promise that whoever took it was going to restore it and not part it out. I gave him $3,200, and I signed a piece of paper he'd written out by hand that said the car was going to be brought back, not broken down. I took the signed paper. That signed paper went into a manila folder I started the day I brought the car home. I drove the Mustang onto a trailer that afternoon and hauled it back to my father's garage. My father had a 3-car garage that was mostly used for a riding mower and 2 decades of accumulated junk. I had asked him, back in August, if I could use one bay for a restoration project. He had said yes in the tone of a man who expected me to lose interest in about 4 months. He had also said, on that same call, "Whatever you want, Evan. I've got the space." I took that as permission. I wrote it down in a notebook with the date because I have kept a notebook on every major project in my life since I was 22. That's a habit my job at the shop taught me. Document everything. Paper beats memory. The first year was all teardown. The car came down to bare metal over 43 weekends. I photographed every stage and kept receipts for every part. I rented a media blaster for a weekend in February and did the bodywork myself in the coldest garage bay in Ohio, in a jumpsuit and a respirator with space heaters running 12 hours a day to keep the primer from flash rusting. My father came out one Saturday in March, looked at the naked chassis on the rotisserie and said, "You know you could buy one of these already done for less than what you're going to spend fixing this one, right?" I said, "I'm not fixing it to sell it." He said, "Every car is for sale eventually." I wrote that sentence down in the notebook. I did not know at the time why I was writing it down. I wrote it down anyway. The second year was mechanical. I pulled the original engine, a 289 that had been seized for 15 years, and had it rebuilt by a machinist in Dayton who only worked on vintage Ford small blocks. That rebuild cost me $8,340. I have the invoice. I have the machinist's business card stapled to it. I have the dyno sheet. All of it is in the folder. The third year was paint, interior, and final assembly. The paint was Highland green, factory correct for a 67, which is a color I chose because I had been looking at pictures of that specific car for 5 years before I ever bought one. The interior I did myself from a kit I ordered from a restoration supplier in Tennessee. The final assembly took me 4 months, because every bolt on a car that has been apart for 3 years is a decision, and I make decisions slowly. I finished the car in July of this year, July 14th. I wrote that down too. The finished car, insured, titled, and road legal under my name, had sat in my father's garage for 11 weeks when my sister started asking questions about it. Marissa is 29. She is my younger sister by 3 years. She has, for most of her adult life, been the kind of person who describes her job as, "I have a few things going right now," which when you translate it out of the language she speaks, it means she does not have a job. She lives in a rented duplex 40 minutes from our parents. She has, in the last 4 years, attempted to start 6 different businesses, none of which have lasted more than a season. The current one, which she had been talking about since the spring, was a mobile luxury spray tan and boutique beauty trailer concept, which she had branded on her Instagram as a rolling glam suite. She had posted about it 73 times since March. The trailer itself, according to her, was going to cost her $38,000 to acquire, wrap, and outfit. She had been, through most of the summer, trying to figure out where $38,000 was going to come from. The first question came in August. We were at my parents' house for a Sunday dinner, which I had started attending again after avoiding them for most of the summer, because my mother had called me and asked me to come. Marissa was there. My father was there. My mother had made pot roast. Halfway through dinner, Marissa, looking at her phone, said, "Hey, random question. What would a finished 1967 Mustang be worth these days?" I did not look up from my plate. "Depends. Like ballpark. 50 to 75, restored, matching numbers, factory color." "That's a lot." "Yeah. Is yours worth that much?" I looked up then. "It's not for sale, Marissa." She smiled. "I know. I was just asking." My father across the table said, "It's a lot of cash to have sitting in a garage." I did not respond. Marissa said, "Seriously though, 75 grand. My mother changed the subject. My father poured more wine. I finished my pot roast, helped clean up, and drove home. On the way home, I stopped at a gas station, sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, and wrote down in my notebook what my father had said. A lot of cash to have sitting in a garage. Date, time, context. I was not paranoid. I was keeping a record. The second thing happened on a Wednesday afternoon in late September. I had stopped by my parents' house to pick up a torque wrench I had left in the garage the previous weekend. My father was at work. My mother was at a dentist appointment. The garage door was up. I walked in and stopped because the Mustang had been moved. I had parked the car in the second bay, angled slightly toward the garage door, the way I always parked it when I wasn't working on it. The car was now in the first bay, squared up, tucked with the overhead light on directly above it. Someone had been photographing it. There were 2 small tripods folded against the back wall of the garage that had not been there the previous Saturday. There was also a phone charger plugged into the outlet by the bench, with a cord I did not recognize. The car stayed where it was. My phone came out. I photographed the garage exactly as I found it, then the tripods, then the charger, then the overhead light angle. The torque wrench went into the truck. I drove home. That night I called Noah Kessler. Noah owns a body shop 20 miles from my parents' place. We have been friends since we were 15. He is the one person outside of me who knows, down to the dollar, what the Mustang cost to restore, because he sourced half the parts for me through his trade network, and he consulted on the paint booth when I couldn't afford to rent one. "Noah, Evan, I need a second opinion. Someone's been photographing the Mustang." He was quiet for a second. "Where?" "My dad's garage, tripods, charger. The car's been moved to catch the light. I took pictures." "Your sister?" "Has to be. Dad wouldn't know how to light a car for sale photos." "You think she's shopping it?" "I think she's probably already got a buyer. She started asking about value at dinner in August. She wouldn't have started asking unless she had someone in mind." "Evan." "Yeah." "What's in your folder?" "Title, registration, insurance, billed receipts, the signed paper from the farmer, every invoice. And photos of every stage of the restoration with date stamps." "Good. I know. Keep it with you. Don't leave it at your parents' house. Don't leave it in the garage." It's in my truck glove box. It's been there since July. Why? I thought about that for a second. Because of what Dad said in March. Every car is for sale eventually. Noah did not say anything for a while. Then he said, "Your dad said that to you." In March. "Evan, your dad's not going to help you. He's going to help whoever brings him a plan that gets him off the hook for the thing he's been quietly wishing would get cleaned up. If your sister has a plan, he's on her side already. He's just waiting for you to not be there when it happens." "I know. Make sure you're there when it happens." I said, "I'm going to be." 3 weeks passed. The tripods came down sometime in the first week of October. The Mustang went back to the second bay. For about 10 days, the garage looked normal again. I visited twice. Both times I checked the car's position, checked the odometer, checked the tire valve stem orientations, which is a habit I have with projects because valve stems rotated half a turn, tell you the wheels have moved. Both times, everything checked out. What I did not check, because I had no reason to, was whether my father still had the spare garage key he had given my mother and never given me. I should have. The group text came in at 9:47 on a Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen, still in a t-shirt and sweats, drinking coffee. My phone was on the counter. It buzzed. The preview showed a message from Marissa in a thread I did not remember being on. Sold. Thanks, Dad, for making it happen. Heading over at 11 to do the pickup. Derek's bringing the trailer. I read it. I read it again. The thread, I realized as I scrolled up, was a family trip planning chain from August of 2023, labeled Caldwell Clan Smokies Trip. I had been added during the planning and never removed. The thread had been dormant for 2 years. Marissa had accidentally sent her confirmation message into the wrong chat. She had meant to send it to a different thread, one I was not on. I sat with the phone in my hand for about 90 seconds. My coffee cooled. My heart rate did not change. I have a heart rate that does not change when I need it most, which is a thing I figured out about myself when I was 21, and my first real girlfriend told me I was either the calmest person she knew or the most emotionally numb. And she was not sure which. I was not numb. I was calculating. I opened my texts. I did not reply to the group thread. I opened a new thread to Noah. "Evan, Marissa sold it. Buyer named Derek. Pick up at 11. Noah. Where? Evan. My parents' driveway. Noah. You have the folder? Evan. Always. Noah. Go. Don't call first. Just drive. I got dressed. I was in my truck by 10:12. The drive to my parents' house is 35 minutes. I made it in 28. I parked 3 houses down, around the corner, out of line of sight from the driveway. I walked up the sidewalk with the folder under my arm and the quiet in my head that I get when the thing I have been preparing for has finally arrived. A black Ford F350 with a flatbed trailer was in the driveway. My father was on the porch. Marissa was on the lawn. And a man I had never seen before was standing next to the trailer, and the Mustang was on the ground behind the trailer, which meant they had not loaded it yet. Marissa was holding something in her hand. I could see from 30 feet away that it was a check. I was 15 feet from the driveway when my father looked up and saw me. He did not look surprised. He looked, if anything, annoyed, like a man whose schedule had been disrupted by a minor inconvenience. He said, "Evan." I said, "Dad." Marissa turned around. Her smile, for the first time that I can remember, failed to fully form. She said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "What are you doing with my car?" The man next to the trailer turned around then. He was in his mid-50s, heavy set, wearing a Carhartt jacket and jeans, and the kind of work boots that said he worked outside. He had a pen in his hand. The check was in Marissa's hand, but the pen had been his. He looked at Marissa. He looked at my father. He looked at me. He said, "Is there a problem?" My father on the porch said, "No problem. Evan, what are you doing here?" I got a group text. "Congratulations on the sale, by the way." Marissa's face changed. It was small, a tightening around the eyes that she probably didn't even know she did. I had seen her do it once, at Christmas when she was 17, when my mother asked her where a $20 bill from the counter had gone. My father said, "Evan, don't make a scene. Your sister's handling something." My car. Evan. Dad. The buyer, who I now knew was named Derek, said, "Hold on. Who owns this vehicle?" Marissa said, "I do. I mean, we do. It's a family car. My dad and I are handling the sale. Evan was working on it, but the car is in my name," I said. "Evan." My father stepped off the porch. "The car is titled in my name, Dad. You know that. You were standing next to me when I registered it in July." Marissa said quickly, "We're still working through the title transfer. It's been a process. That's why we needed to do the sale in cash." Derek looked at her. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at my father. My father, who had been on the porch with his arms crossed, uncrossed them and walked down the steps. He was working on something to say. I could see the sentence forming. He chose the sentence he had been practicing for about 2 weeks, which I know because it came out of his mouth exactly the way a man speaks when he has rehearsed. He said, "Evan, stop crying over metal. And your sister has bigger plans for the cash." There it was. The sentence he had come up with to reduce 3 years of work, $10,000 of parts, 1,000 hours of labor, and the one thing I had built cleanly in my entire adult life, into a single word. Metal. A dismissive noun. I did not cry. I have not cried since I was 11. That was the year my father told me that crying was something that happened to other people's kids. And I decided he was right about that specific thing, even though he was wrong about most other things. I looked at Derek. I said, "Can I show you something?" Derek said, "Please." I opened the folder. I handed Derek the first page. It was the title to the vehicle, issued by the Ohio BMV, dated July 15th of the current year. Registered to Evan Michael Caldwell. Address listed, VIN listed. Our previous title transfers listed back to the 2022 sale, with the signed statement from the farmer in southern Ohio attached as a supplemental document. Derek looked at it for about 8 seconds. He did not speak. I handed him the second page. It was the current insurance declaration issued by State Farm, listing the 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, VIN matching, insured under Evan Michael Caldwell as the sole owner. Premium paid through February of next year. Derek looked at that for 4 seconds. Then he looked at Marissa. His face did a specific thing. It was the face of a man who had driven 90 minutes with a trailer and a check, and who had, in the last 45 seconds, understood that he had been told a story. I said, "The car is not for sale. It has never been for sale. My sister does not own it. My father does not own it. No title transfer has been filed because no title transfer is possible without my signature, which I have not provided because nobody asked me. You just handed a check for an amount I'd like to see, by the way, to somebody who has no authority to sell this vehicle to you." Derek said, "It's $22,000. I almost laughed. The car, restored, matching numbers, factory color, running condition, was worth between $60,000 and $75,000 on the current market. 22 was not a lowball. 22 was the kind of number a private seller uses when the private seller wants the transaction to close fast and quietly, in cash, before anybody shows up to ask questions. I said, "The car is worth 3 times that. You knew that. You were doing my sister a favor, and you were doing yourself a favor at the same time." Derek opened his mouth. He closed it. Marissa said, "Evan, stop. No. Evan, we can talk about this inside. We're not talking about it. You're not selling it." I looked at Derek again. Derek was already stepping back from the trailer. His hand had come off the winch. He was, I could see, running his own calculation. A collector, 54 years old, buying a car in cash from a woman who did not own it, against the documented objection of the actual title holder, from a driveway in front of a witness and possibly neighbors, in a state where the civil and criminal definitions of stolen property were not subjects he wanted to test. He said, "I need my check back." Marissa said, "Derek." "Ma'am, I need my check back." She looked at my father. My father looked at the porch. Derek said one more time, slower, "I need my check back, ma'am, right now." And then, because it was the only sentence left to say, and because it was the sentence that Noah had told me to prepare for, and because it was the sentence that would end the thing that had been set up around me for months, I looked at Derek and I said it. "You just bought stolen property. I'd get the check back if I were you." Derek's smile dropped. He had been wearing a small, polite smile since I walked up the driveway. The kind of smile a working man uses on strangers to keep a situation level. That smile was gone within a second. My father's smile dropped about 4 seconds later. He was slower to process because he had not, I think, I fully understood until that moment what his role in the morning had looked like from the outside. He had thought he was on the porch being a family patriarch. What he had actually been doing from the outside was standing next to an unauthorized seller with his arms crossed while a stranger handed her a check for property she did not own. Marissa, who processed things fastest because she had the most to lose, took about 7 seconds. Her smile did not drop. It inverted. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Derek said, "Oh, ma'am, the check." Marissa handed him the check. Derek folded it once, put it in the inside pocket of his Carhartt, and turned to me. He said, "I'm going to need your information. I was told a story this morning that wasn't true. I'd like that in writing from you, if you'd be willing. For my protection." I said, Yes." Derek said, "I'm going to unhitch the trailer and leave. Right now." He did. It took him 4 minutes. Nobody spoke while he did it. My father stood on the porch. Marissa stood on the lawn with her hands at her sides. The Mustang stayed where it was behind the trailer, in the driveway of a house that did not belong to the person who had tried to sell it. When Derek drove away, his truck was lighter by a trailer and a check. The three of us were alone. Marissa started first. She turned to me with the particular expression she gets when she is preparing to rewrite something that just happened. "Evan, you didn't have to do it that way." "What way?" "Publicly. You could have pulled me aside. We could have talked. We could have worked it out. You didn't have to make it into this." "Make it into what, Marissa?" "Like you sold my car. I was going to pay you back." "With what money?" "With the money from the sale." I looked at her. I said, "You were going to pay me back for my own car with the money you got from selling my car." She said, "Evan, I had a plan." My father from the porch said, "Evan, she had a plan. Let her explain." I turned. "Dad, go inside." "This is my house, Evan. It's your house, it's not your car, and it's not your conversation. This is between Marissa and me, and you can watch from the porch or you can go inside, but you are not participating." He did not go inside. He stayed on the porch. He did, however, stop talking for about 4 minutes. Marissa kept going. I want to give her credit for this. She tried in real time 4 different framings in the space of about 6 minutes. She tried the family ownership framing. The car is kind of a family car, Evan, because it was in Dad's garage. She tried the business necessity framing. You don't understand what this trailer would have meant for my career. She tried the emotional debt framing. I've had to watch you work on that thing for 3 years while Dad ignored everything I was building. And she tried, last, the blame shift framing. You should have made it clearer this was going to be a problem. I let her run. I did not interrupt any of them. I have a rule about that, which is that people who are building 4 framings in 6 minutes are telling you something important, which is that they are not sure which one will land, and the one that lands will tell you where they think the weakness is. In her case, she settled on the blame shift, which told me that in her head, the problem with this morning was that I had not in advance communicated clearly enough that my car was my car. When she was done, I said, Marissa, where's the bill of sale? She said, what? The bill of sale. Derek signed a check. You wouldn't have taken a check for $22,000 without a piece of paper. Where's the bill of sale? There's not one. There is one. You had something for him to sign. You had to. He wouldn't have handed you a check otherwise. A 54-year-old collector in a Carhartt jacket does not hand a woman on a lawn $22,000 in exchange for nothing. Where's the bill of sale? She did not answer. My father said from the porch, Evan, enough. Marissa, bill of sale, now. Or I'm calling the BMV investigation line on Monday morning, and you can explain the transaction to them. She turned toward her car, a red Jeep Compass parked at the end of the driveway. She walked to it slowly. She opened the passenger door. She reached into a tote bag on the seat. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and walked it back to me. I unfolded it. It was a bill of sale, handwritten on a template form she had clearly downloaded and printed. Purchaser, Derek Hanley. Seller, Evan Michael Caldwell. Amount, $22,000. Vehicle, 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. VIN matching. The seller's signature line at the bottom of the form was signed. It was signed Evan M. Caldwell. The signature was not mine. The paper sat at arm's length for about 15 seconds. My eyes moved across it, then to my sister, then to my father on the porch. I said, "Marissa, tell me you didn't." She said, "It was going to get signed. I was going to have Dad sign it as power of attorney, and then you would have agreed after, because you would have seen how much the trailer meant, and you forged my signature. I traced it." "From what?" "From your insurance card. Dad had a copy of it." I looked at my father. My father looked at the porch railing. I said, "Dad, you gave her a copy of my insurance card." He said, "She asked for it. She said she needed to look something up for her taxes." "My insurance card? For her taxes?" "Evan." "Dad." "Son, I didn't know what she was going to do with it." "You did, Dad. You absolutely did. You knew she was photographing the car in your garage in September because you gave her the spare key. You knew she was contacting buyers because she told you she had one. You knew she was going to need documents because she told you she needed documents. You called Derek this morning, didn't you? Before he came. You called him to, quote, confirm everything was clean, didn't you?" He did not answer. "Didn't you, Dad?" He said, "I told him the paperwork was being handled. I didn't know about." You told a buyer that the paperwork was being handled on a car that wasn't in your name or your daughter's name. And then you stood on the porch and watched her hand him a forged document while he wrote a check for less than a third of what the car was worth. And when I drove up, you told me to stop crying over metal. The porch went quiet. I folded the bill of sale back up and put it in the folder. I said, "This is going in my records. So is the text message. So is the check, which I'd like to see, Marissa, before you do anything with it." She said, "Derek took the check. He folded it. He didn't destroy it. He's going to want a written statement from me, which means he's keeping the check as evidence. I'll ask him for a photo." "That's fine. We're done here for now. I'm moving the car to Noah's shop this afternoon. Dad, I'm taking my spare key and the spare key you gave Marissa and any other copies that exist in this house. Marissa, if you contact Derek again for any reason, I will add that to the file. Do you understand what I'm saying?" She did not respond. "Marissa, do you understand?" She said, "Yes." I called Noah from the driveway. He answered on the first ring. "Evan, it's over." She handed me a forged bill of sale. Dad called the buyer this morning and told him the paperwork was being handled. Jesus. I need the car at your shop today. I can drive it. It's running. Can I put it in your back bay for the week? Front bay, I'll move the Camaro. How are you? I'm fine. Evan. I'm fine, Noah. Okay, drive safe. I'll be here. I hung up. The Mustang was where Derek had left it. The driver's door opened with the hinge sound I had spent a Saturday getting right in August. The keys were on the driver's seat where Derek had set them down when he walked away from the trailer. They went in my pocket. I got in. The engine, which I had rebuilt bolt by bolt over 43 weekends of my life, started on the second crank and settled into the idle I had tuned it to 2 months earlier. I backed it out of the driveway. I did not look at my father on the porch. I did not look at Marissa on the lawn. I drove. I drove to Noah's shop. I put the car in the front bay. He moved the Camaro. He looked at the forged bill of sale for about 30 seconds, then handed it back to me without saying anything. He made me a cup of coffee. We sat in the office for about 20 minutes in mostly silence. Then he said, "You need to call Celia." Celia Mercer had been a title clerk at the Ohio BMV for 18 years. She was a family friend, distantly through my mother's sister. She was also the person who had processed the title transfer when I'd bought the Mustang from the farmer in 2022. Noah had suggested her back then because she was known in the restorer community for catching title fraud in rural Ohio. I called her on Monday morning. She remembered the transaction. She pulled the title records from the state system while I was on the phone. Everything checked out on my end. No transfer request had been filed. No duplicate title had been requested. No address change had been made. The car was mine cleanly, and the paper Marissa had tried to pass to Derek would not have survived the first review at the BMV. Celia said, "Evan, I want you to file a fraud notification. Even if you don't press charges, I want this on record, because if she tried this once, she'll try it twice. I said, I'll come in Wednesday. Bring the folder. The folder has been ready since July. She paused. Then she said, good boy. I filed the fraud notification on Wednesday. The BMV flagged the title with a note that said any future transfer request required in-person verification from the registered owner. Once Celia handed me the receipt for the filing, I put it in the folder. Derek sent his written statement on Thursday. It came by email, printed on his business letterhead. He ran a small trucking company out of a town 90 minutes south. The statement was 2 paragraphs. He wrote that on the morning of the sale, he had been contacted by Marissa Caldwell through a private Facebook listing, that the car had been described to him as a family restoration project that the family was selling due to changing priorities, that he had spoken by phone with Ronald Caldwell on the morning of the sale, who had confirmed the family was handling the paperwork together, and that upon arriving at the address, he had been prepared to complete the sale. He wrote that the actual title holder had arrived and presented documentation, warned that he had verified the title was not the seller's, and that he had retrieved his check and left the property without taking possession of the vehicle. He signed it. He dated it. I saved it to the folder. I wrote Derek a short reply. I thanked him for the statement. I told him the check had not cleared and he was made whole. He wrote back within an hour. His reply said, Mr. Caldwell, you did me a favor on Saturday. I've been in this hobby for 30 years. I've never been close to a stolen property situation until your sister. If you ever want to sell that car, you have my number. If you never sell it, I understand. Good luck to you. I saved that too. The fallout from Marissa came in pieces through my mother over the next 3 weeks. The trailer vendor she had put a deposit on, in anticipation of the sale closing, already kept the deposit when she failed to come up with the balance. $6,000 gone. The branding company she had hired to design the trailer wrap sent her an invoice for the work they had already completed, which she did not have the money to pay. $4,000 in collections. The business name she had registered with the Secretary of State in August got quietly dissolved when the annual filing came due, and she did not have the money for the fee. My mother called me in November and asked if I would be willing to help Marissa with some of the debt, just to close out the loose ends. I said no. My mother asked if I could at least come to Thanksgiving. I said I would think about it. I did think about it. I did not go. The last thing happened on a Saturday afternoon in December. I drove to my parents' house when I knew they were out. I let myself in with the house key I still had because my mother had asked me not to change that specifically, and my mother, unlike my father, had not participated in any of what had happened. I walked through the kitchen to the garage. The garage was quiet. The second bay, where the Mustang had lived for 3 years, was empty. My father had, at some point in the last 2 months, moved his riding mower into the bay. There was an oil stain on the concrete where my engine stand used to sit. I took the spare house key my father had given Marissa, which I had taken from her on the day of the sale, and which had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 2 months. I set it on my father's workbench. Next to it, I set a sheet of paper. So the sheet of paper was a receipt from a locksmith I had hired the week before. The locksmith had installed a new deadbolt on the side door of Noah's garage, where the Mustang now lived, and had keyed it to a single key, which I carried in my pocket. The receipt had Noah's address on it. It did not have my father's address on it. That was the point. The walk out of my parents' garage was short. The house closed behind me. My truck started on the first turn of the key. The drive to Noah's shop took me the long way. The Mustang was in the front bay. The new lock was on the side door. The folder was on the passenger seat of my truck, where it had been since July. The side door opened under my hand. The inside of Noah's shop was quiet and warm. Behind me, the deadbolt turned. The garage was quiet. The car was mine. It had always been mine. And the only difference now was that everyone else had finally figured that out.